so much for joining. Let's talk about it with Jamie Jones Irvin. Today's topic is all things race relations, or maybe some things race relations. I don't know that one podcast episode could take care of all things, but this is race relations, allyship, and just an honest dialogue with my new friend, Suzanne Roberts, a new friend who I was introduced to almost a decade ago. You talk about just the manifestation of things. So anyway, she's here. She is a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information, a genuine person in the space of fostering healthy, honest, authentic dialogue as it pertains to race relations. So we're just going to chat and invite you to listen to it, and we'll go from there. Suzanne, tell me, because I don't even know the exact number, what's a roundabout age for you?
73.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're 73. Do you know when you first became aware of race?
I actually do.
Okay. Tell us about that.
I was 4 years old, and I was down in Little Rock, Arkansas. My father was a doctor in the Army, and we were visiting another doctor in Little Rock, and I remember it being a white house with pillars with a circular driveway in front. And they had help. Like, there was another driveway that went down the hill and back, and there was, it's hard to remember as for whether it was a room behind the garage or whatever, but there was help that lived there. And I was always an independent person, and I ran down the hill and I started playing with the help's kids.
Okay.
And the dinner bell rang, and I went in with them. And I remember there being like a swinging light and smells and a spirited environment. And somebody came and got me and dragged me up the hill and said, "You don't belong there. You belong here." And whether I didn't I can't say that I had cognitive pedagogy around it, right, but I felt what I call the chill of white supremacy as I walked up the hill. I was like, oh, I felt like I had to get cold inside to shut off. Go on.
No. You say you were what? Did you say 4 years old or 7?
4.
And so you were born in what, 63? 53?
52.
52. So this would have been 1956 or so. Like, I think that's worth staying in the space for a minute. We're not talking about, we're talking 1956. Wow, interesting. Okay. So in your home, growing up, I'm guessing based on that, you didn't see a lot of people of color in and out of your home?
Well, I grew up in Bexley.
Okay.
And there was help.
Yeah.
In the home, and at school there were janitors or the kitchen workers. I had another experience when I was probably around 5 or 6. We had a help named Mary, who I remember she was an older woman, and she wore an apron, and she always, with my brother and me, who was a year older than me, produced magic for us. And she would bring out candy or something from her pockets. And I remember one day my father, who was not a good person, came home, and she was cooking, and he was smoking a cigar. And she said to him, "Would you mind not smoking the cigar while I'm cooking?" And he basically got belligerent and made her leave and told her to never come back. And I just remember her putting her hand on my shoulder and saying to me, "I'm so sorry, I have to leave you." And she left. So I saw, I kept seeing things and I don't know how or what happened. Oh, I know. Later we had a woman that was our nanny that lived, I would say, in Columbus in an urban environment, and she would take me home with her. So I would go from Bexley into the urban area where she lived in a half a double with, her kids were grown, but there were probably 10 people living in this half a double. Mm-hmm. So I ended up seeing an urban environment compared to most of my friends never went into that part of town or saw that part of town. And when I did my volunteer work in high school, I did it at Champion in Maine.
Okay.
I don't know. I've had exposure and but it wasn't talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember writing a paper around about Dr. Martin Luther King and about freedom. And I never got one comment about the content. I just only had a correction about a comma. But
Wow.
nobody said, oh, deep thinking or great for caring or it.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I learned to kind of shove it in, not kind of, I learned to shove it in and act like I didn't know what I knew. I just had to get in what I call the white supremacy groove of,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
How did that show up for you physically?
physically.
How did stuffing that? How did how did it show up for you physically, and how did it show up for you unconsciously? Like, you know what I mean? Or do you even know those answers?
I don't know that I know the answers. I do know that I think that I just had to shut down what I saw and shut down the part of me that knew I was benefiting from something that was producing harm, and I had to numb myself against it to belong.
Wow.
It's just interesting because then, I do feel like this. It's similar to what happened when I walked up the hill at 4 years old, this shutting down, this chilling, this denying, this refusing, and
Right.
it protects superiority and it protects comfort and just go along, until I couldn't do it anymore. But
Right.
that took a long time. It really actually took until probably my 40s to really shake myself out of it.
I want to hear about that shaking. I want to hear about when the external ground started breaking, because the internal ground started breaking at 7 or 4 when up the hill.
Or
But I really want to hear about when the volcano finally erupted. And I'm interested to hear from you because I do respect your mind, and I respect the conundrum in which you find yourself. Because factually, who doesn't want to enjoy benefits, right? I mean, let's just,
right.
you know what I'm saying? Um,
Sure.
but to hear you say, I've had to accept that I was the beneficiary of things that caused harm to others. And I can assume being in spaces, hearing jokes, hearing non-jokes, right, that were offensive or just wrong, misaligned. How did you, during the time before the volcano, how did you grapple with that?
You're asking a really good question that I don't want to answer real fast, to
Okay.
be honest with you. Well, I think also I'd have to start more from growing up because my, grandfather said openly racist things. And, I would sit and cringe inside, but I was afraid of him. He had a
Right.
temper, right? So I would just go like this, like, cringe and go like, don't feel safe,
Mm.
and, I have one more story to tell you, come to think of it. So in second grade, we had a Black family move into Bexley. At that time, there were no Black students at Bexley.
Okay.
And
So this was around, so you were about 7. So this is in the 60s, early
yeah,
60s. Okay.
no Black families.
Okay.
So maybe because of when I was 4, I went over to the girl's house. And I remember it was up above either like the drugstore, or it was upstairs somewhere. And I had fun. And that night, my mom got called and said, don't ever have your daughter. Do you know your daughter was playing with, I don't know what word they used back then, and don't ever have her do that again. And my mom came to me and said, wow, someone called me and said, you went and played. And, the family was gone pretty soon after that. So I think then I was like, oh my gosh, you know,
Right.
did I make this happen?
Oh,
Do you
wow.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I was
Yeah.
young, but like
Sure.
I had so many incidents, I think, compared to most people. In a way, I don't know, because I don't know. But anyway, when I think back, I think what I just learned to do was like, just squeeze myself inside, numb myself inside, but underneath that feel outrage, and then numb on top of it and just move along, to be honest with you.
So tell us about the season where you decided, okay, I can't do this anymore. I want to be clear on where I stand on these issues. What was the impetus behind that? Was there an event? Do you even remember?
Well, it was sort of evolutionary. Yes, I do. I was doing a master's program for my coaching. And in it, they gave us a question about what would you, if you went to your grave, what would you miss not doing, or what purpose do you have? And I thought, I want to make sure there's more women in leadership. So I created a public course called Women Generating, and then I started learning about intersectionality.
Okay.
And then we had to do an intersectional analysis of our own social shaping. And then these memories started coming back. And then I was like, if I'm going to do women, I can't have it be white women, because then I'm doing white feminism the way it was done, or, the beginning of the suffragettes, or whatever it is. I didn't want to repeat history. So I started reading things, and it just was like this thaw. It wasn't like an explosion, but it was a thawing. And with each thawing,
Okay.
It was a thawing. And with each thawing, I would require myself another action. So I would think, okay, how can I build relationships with diverse women to bring them into my training? And so I did. And then like one woman came, I think she was at Nationwide at the time, and she came to me after the first training and she said, I love your work, but I have to do this with white women all day long, and I'm not doing it on my own time. And then I was like, oh, I'm tokenizing here.
Wow. So wait. I want to go back. Because I want to stay there, because just for the time frame of it all. What about what you said? This was in your 40s.
I think this was.
So we're talking about 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. It's hard for me to really remember the exact. It could have been my late 30s, early 40s.
Okay.
Somewhere around in there. I don't have.
I'm just painting a picture. So this was somewhere in like the 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I so appreciated her saying that to me. And I was like, oh, Suzanne, you are tokenizing here. You're not really taking a moral stand.
Yes.
And if you really are going to take a moral stand, what's your requirement here? So I'm like, I've got to work towards both, working towards 50% racial diversity in my class, but building people up so that my facilitators are a minimum of 50% racial diversity. And that required a shift. Some people just don't want to make that shift because it required building relationship. And I always say nobody should trust white people until they're proven trustworthy. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
yes,
you do.
I do.
Yes, you do. So you do. But some white people don't like hearing that. But I don't assume people should trust me.
Yeah.
People of color. I don't. I'm like, get to know me over time, watch my actions.
Yeah.
Let me show you who I am to earn the trust. But that takes time. In a business model, people think you don't have that time.
Okay.
If I can just usher white women in and get them to pay me, you know what I'm saying? It's different. So I'm like, I don't really care. I am going to take the time to do the right moral and ethical thing.
So as the thawing was happening, and I really like that phraseology, as the thawing was happening, because you said a chill hit you. So I don't even know if you realize the layering, right?
Yes.
As we are working to identify, because I don't know that you've named this before, but that as you walked up the hill, that a chill hit.
Chill.
And time again, when things you would be pulled from, chills would hit, and you're in situations, a chilling would happen. And so it's just a beautiful picture of the thawing, right?
Yes.
And so when the thawing began, and I know that I don't expect for you to know, I know the exact day it began, but around the season of it, were you already married? Were you in relationship? Did you have children yet?
I had children, and I had been married. I don't think at the time I was in a relationship.
Okay, so you were a single woman going through, or single again woman going through
Yeah.
some of. Okay, because I was going to ask how it showed up in that relationship. Was your partner thawed? But if there was no partner on site, how did it show up in your social settings or any social organizations you were a part of, a church affiliation, family reunions? Because as the thawing happened, the caterpillar is becoming the butterfly. And
Yeah.
how did that show up for you?
I think a couple things. I did a training where I was one of the few white people, and I did produce harm in the room.
Oh.
And I took a step back to see what was operating inside of me that produced that kind of harm. And when I say harm, I don't mean Ku Klux Klan
Right.
harm. It was just a misstep, but it was hurtful to somebody. And I had to take a deep look at my own social conditioning, and I had to understand how racism got inside my psyche, whether I wanted it to or not. And so one of the things I always say is like, you can have a good heart, but until you examine how racism gets into your psyche, you will act it out in some way. It doesn't have to be like Ku Klux Klan level, but it could be like dismissing somebody's, we talk about,
Experience.
experience. Or like I've said to you before, a Black woman will speak in a room and then a white woman will say the same thing. It's not even owning the thought. It's just like that statement wasn't valid enough on its own.
Right.
Things like that are hurtful. And I just had to start really digging in, and I had to understand how whiteness operates and how it was operating inside of me. And how did race get created? And I just read and studied. I made myself watch really uncomfortable and painful things. I really did. I thought, okay, so if you're going to do this, you got to get real here. This is no joke, and it's going to be a lifelong journey. I'm not done. I'm always unpacking, and so it will be the rest of my life. And so that, a lot of little things and big things happened along the way. And I think another monumental thing happened is because I started talking about race everywhere I was anymore. I just didn't care. I would have some, come into my women generating class, and I'd have some Black women come in and they're like, we're really doing this. We're really talking about race in here. Like,
right.
I just was like, I can't not, I'm unwilling to not talk about it. I'm required to talk about how white supremacy operates and how we all get seduced by it and hurt by it. We all
good.
do.
No, that's good. That's good. I think about, as you were talking, and I'm here in my home studio, and so my office is at the front of my house, and so I can see houses, some of my neighbors' houses. When you speak to the earning of trust, right? So we have lived over here for about 8 years, and we are one of the very few where we are. It's kind of a joke. We have more now, but it used to be like one on each street of the, one Black family on each of the streets within the subdivision. And the houses where we are, we don't have fences in our backyards, right? If you have a pet, you usually have the invisible fence. If you have fencing at all, it's more like farm fencing. So it's like you can get through the slats, right? You know what I'm saying? But we don't have fences. Most of the yards are just open, which means the kids can cut through to get to a street over. My kid can really go through my neighbor's front yard, backyard, and be on the next street type of thing, right? I hope I'm painting that picture correctly. At any rate, I have always told my children, don't do that.
Right.
You can't run through. And even when they're outside running with their friends, and it's no, you don't run through the yards. You tell your buddies you'll meet them around. You don't run through the yards, and having to have that hard truth in 2020s, right? 2019, 20, you know what I'm saying? We're not removed from it. So my every once in a while, my youngest, who's now 17, he doesn't really cut through the yards much anymore, but every now and then he still did it, and it would just unnerve me. It would unnerve me. It would generate fear. And he would say, "Mom, these are our neighbors. They know me." And I remember saying, "But we don't know them."
Right.
And I'm talking about neighbors, Suzanne. This is full transparency. We sit at each other's decks. We've been in each other's homes. We toast the holiday. You know what I'm saying? We do the neighborhood things. Just like, but we don't know them. So picture this. I'm at a basketball game a couple of months ago, and one of the young ladies, a Brown family from a street over, she saw me. And she's a recent graduate from the high school, and she says, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Of course," because I love young people. Said, "Of course." And she said, "Do you know," I'm just going to say, "Mr. Smith?" And I said, "I do. I do." I said, "Lives da da da." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Yes, I know Mr. Smith." She said, "Do you know he profiled me?" And I said, "Well, no, I didn't know that. How would I know that?" You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And she said that she and her friend were outside hanging out, leaning against the cars, talking or whatever, outside of her home, and that Mr. Smith was walking his dog, and asked her, "What are you doing over here?" And she said, "I live here." And he said, "I've never seen you."
Wow.
And she said, "So I told him, I've never seen you either. Where do you live?" And he was like, "Well, I don't believe you live here," and had really gotten belligerent with her. And she acquiesced her power. Now, those are not the words she used. This is I'm calling it what it was. Because she said to him, "Well, you can go ring the doorbell." Right. And he did. And her parents opened, and he said, "Oh, I just wanted to make sure they were safe out here, blah, 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 blah." And she was like, "That is not what happened." But she waited till after he left, and she told her parents, "That is not what happened. He wasn't making sure we were safe. He was profiling us." And I've held that. Like, I still haven't told, my husband knows, but I still haven't told my child that. And I don't know if I'm protecting him or harming him. Right. But that's through the lens of when I say we don't know.
Right.
He was absolutely out of pocket for that. So I told another neighbor about it. And that neighbor said to me, and you talk about doing harm in a room, because this was a dangerous, I'll say this was risky. This was risky for me to share with a non-melanated neighbor my experience. Because first of all, both of them have been here. They had their houses built over here. Right. So they know each other very well. I'm the new kid on the block, and I'm the new kid on the block, even though it's been almost a decade. Right. So I shared with her what I just shared with you. And her response did my heart so much good. She said, "Wow, that shocks me, but I guess you just never know people." What I appreciate is she gave her truth. That's not who I know him to be. But she did not invalidate the experience that this young woman had, And so, but it has been difficult seeing them. We've seen them out a couple of times. I mean, frankly, we saw them at the country club, Suzanne. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's just like, hi. It's a something, because I too have to thaw.
Yes.
I too, and when these things happen, for me, it's like a refreeze. It's a refreeze, because I was the opposite a lot. We did have white people in our home, or people not of color, whatever phraseology is comfortable for the mass. My father was a business owner, so he had, I'll say, white friends. You know what I'm saying? As best you could, and it was it was a different time. It was a different time. I'll say it that way. But I still remember. And I went to school that was predominantly, majority. And I remember once my mother was late picking me up from school. And so I think this girl's name was Alicia. She was a white girl. I don't know. Anyway, but I got it. Her mother was there to pick her up. And she was like, "Hey, I can take you home. Your mom can come to my house and get you." So I called my mom at work, and she was like, "Yeah, that's fine." So I did that. And so I'm on the phone in the office, and I said, "I'll call you when I get there, and I'll give you the address." Because, this is when we still use Maps goes. There was no Siri and all of this. And so I called from my friend's house. They had invited me to stay for dinner. And so when I called, I said, Mama said they're asking me to stay for dinner. Is it okay if I eat? And because culturally we're taught you don't ask for food, you don't that whole thing. And so she was like, yes, that's fine. She said, I'll be there, tell her thank you. So I had to whisper in the phone, Mama, she's white. Right. So that my mother would not be stunned when she came to pick me up, right? Because this was just a school friend, a class friend. And the way we lived, we could be best buds at school, but we never went to each other's homes.
Mm-hmm.
If we were different races, we just didn't. And I don't know. I know that there was some level of intentionality, but I do believe that it was unconscious intentionality. Because I never thought about when I invited Heather, Tamika, Sharon. I never thought about, hey, y'all want to come? We're going to a slumber party this weekend. Latanya, you know what I mean? We Sharice, we just did it. But my Caucasian friends, I didn't go to their homes a lot as a teenage woman. So I was on the other side of the coin from you. Yeah, I remember you talk about doing harm, and this is your time. So I'm just going to share this one other thing because it may ignite a memory for you. I remember being in the 11th grade, and again, I won't say her name, to Sally Smith. So a young lady came to school. She was really dark skinned, and she had braids, right? And Sally said to me, Jamie, she said, that's a, and I said, huh? And she said, see, you're not. She said, look at your skin. Your skin isn't dark like that. Your skin isn't dark like that. And you wear your hair straight. I know people would want to say, I would have punched her. I would have so and so and so and so. What we have to do, especially for our children, is to honor the space that they're in from the standpoint that sometimes we're asking children to take stands against friends. And the social construct of a teenager is already difficult. Right. And so I know that statement that she made to me, I fully know it was a harmful statement, Suzanne. I'm not negating that. But I also know in her own little warped, because she's a teenager too, right? In her own teenage mind, she was attempting to make me feel better. And so as I want to hear, like you shared a little bit, besides the time in your classroom, are there social settings where you've gotten it wrong?
Absolutely. I want to say something about what you just said, though. I want to go back to the part about being a good person, but not knowing how race and gets in the mind,
Yes.
and not checking it. And I'll give you a concrete example. We lived in Clintonville, and we often had a Black woman house sit and dog sit for us, and eventually she moved in. One day, she didn't have a car, so my husband was going to drive her to work, and she carried a bag outside of the house. She left the storm door, the big door she left open, and the storm door was there. My neighbor saw a Black woman leave the house with a bag and didn't shut the door and called the police. So I'm upstairs. I had a concussion, so I had a headache. And I hear the door open and I go, who's there? And they said, Columbus police. And I started to come to the top of the stairs and they pulled a weapon. And then I'm like, excuse me. And they said, well, we had a call about suspicious behavior. And I was like, oh.
Oh my God.
Okay. So anyway, we got a letter written that she lived with us. We went around to the neighbors and said, we want to make sure you all are looking out. And I called to find out who called.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote a letter and I gave it to Donna James to look at. And Donna said, you cannot put this sentence in there. And it was, I believe you're acting from implicit bias. And Donna said, you're accusing them of something and you won't keep the door open. And I was so angry that Donna told me to take that sentence out.
Yeah.
But I did. I trust Donna and I put the letter. So this woman called me and said, thank you so much for your letter. And she did not see the incident. Her next door neighbor saw the incident and had her call.
I see.
So she was a public defender. And when she found out what happened, she was so upset. So she came down and she apologized profusely to this person who I'm going to call Jane,
Sure.
whatever. And Jane was like, I'll accept your apology, but I'm not going to forget what happened because this happens all the time. So she didn't let her off the hook. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And the person, I still, because Donna said to me, until you get to a certain state, don't talk to them. And I have not ever gotten to the state.
You're not to that state. Mm-hmm.
Still, this is like probably 12 years later because I still feel this rage come up inside of me.
Yeah.
And I want to say one more thing about what happens in our head, where if you don't get educated about what racial harm is, what whiteness is, how it operates, how superiority and comfort operates, how the three-fifths compromise, how we dehumanize Black people, whether you want to or not. It's in your brain to dehumanize them, whether your heart thinks it. So if you're not unpacking, if you're counting on your heart, you're going to hurt. If you're willing to go into your head and look at so I'm going to give you an example. After that, we moved to Wilson and Oak. Okay. And it was at a time when there were still gunshots going on and things like that. That my neighbors, we put a Black Lives Matter sign out, but my neighbors were like, we don't want you here. You're gentrifying, all those things. And so, but two things. One is I wasn't used to Black youth walking by with low hanging pants and I'm like, I could feel myself flinch. And I'm like, Suzanne, do you flinch when a white man walks by? Not that they did very much, but are you flinching? And I go, where is that coming from? You're not even in present time to assess danger. You're not being with what is. And that was like such a moment for me of looking at what my mind is socialized to think and to criminalize versus it's not actually what was happening. And I ended up becoming friends with people in the neighborhood.
Sure.
So, and there's a market across the street. And I learned a lot about food deserts when I learned so many things while I lived there. So, but there were only a few white people around, and they came to me and said, you don't want to go into that market. And I'm like, why do I not want to go in the market?
Right.
I went in the market, introduced myself. There was someone there who was unhoused that I became really good friends with, who, would look, he would look out. He knew who was who in the neighborhood, and he was would look out for us. But it was and then one day, one of the kids was walking by that went to St. Charles, and on the way home, he stopped and talked to me. And he went home and he said, Mom, these people are for real. So she ended up coming down, and we're very good friends. But they got priced out of the neighborhood because their rent doubled, and it was so I saw gentrification happen. We went down we had lawyers come to the house and looked at, we brought all the developers in and asked them if they could do different things to diversify housing and protect the neighborhood. They weren't willing to. They just wanted to make money. We went down to the state house and talked to different people. Nothing ever came of it because you need more than a few of us to have an impact. But let me just say, I learned a lot about how the mind is, just how my mind went to criminalizing without thinking about it. And
I appreciate, because you said if we're trusting our hearts, we're doing harm.
Yeah, because the heart's like, I'm a good person.
Yeah.
But the mind is dehumanizing, and it's this disconnect. And if we don't pay attention to what, it's like what you were I'm saying all this because the person that, did a harmful thing, she's not examining her mind and thinking she's being a good person and producing harm. And so I ended up doing these safe conversations, not comfortable, with a man named Jim White. He's now 84, through the YWCA and the Columbus Foundation. And they were public things where we would dialogue like you and I are, but we did it publicly. And then they could ask questions. And then and it would be like 150 people at a time. And it was usually 50% racially diverse. And it was like in Columbus, it's so segregated racially and economically. We would put them into groups and have them talk to each other. And it was like, I saw more change from that than diversity trainings.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that was how I was introduced to you. If you remember,
that's right.
It was one of those. It was through when I was working at one of the NAIS schools here in the city, and we went to a conference, and you and Mr. White did a workshop that I attended, and so I have had the privilege, and I remember hearing it and it landing, and I was like, I said I need to know those people, because the conversations were authentic. It wasn't a stick. It wasn't performative. And that's good because I want to get to performative allyship. And as you have done the work and are doing the work, okay, I am comfortable saying you have found yourself with some other individuals who think they're doing the work.
Yes.
But realizing that it's performative allyship. And I want to hear your position on that. How would you define it? And how does it negatively impact what it is that we're trying to build, the authentic relationships that we're trying to build?
I've seen performative things many times.
Yeah.
I can smell them a mile away.
That's good.
No, I would say the performative are when you want to be a good person and you're not checking what's in your head. And I can even give you an example. I've been doing a training with 2 Black women in a private school, and the headmaster, we just went over some of the microaggressions, and she did it. Like there was only one Black person on the leadership team. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the Black woman and I thought, do I say something here right now? Do I give her a chance to say something? But right now, I'm not going to do anything. I knew we were taking breaks soon, and I wanted to check in with her first. And I said to this person, who we'll call X, mm-hmm. I just want to check in and let you know that I saw this happen.
Okay.
Thank you for seeing it. Do you want me to say something? I don't want to take the agency away from the person.
Yes.
Do you want me to say something, or do you want to say something? Because I'm not going to do anything. I want you to give me the lead here. And she sat with it for a minute. And she said, I actually would like you to, please. But that was an agreement between us, me respecting her agency and her authority, and not like being the white savior. Like, oh, I'm going to call this out. And, and that takes a nuanced sensitivity, because sometime it might be the right thing for me to say something, but in that moment, no.
Well, and and I find it interesting because again, my children are products of some of the schools that we're talking that you're probably working, not the exact school type is what I'm saying. And I even look at when I was doing D&I work in those institutions, and it was early on. One of the things that we pushed schools to understand, even changing certain titles, like it's not the headmaster. You're the head of school. You're the head of school. Mm-hmm. And just the blatant refusal to shift that language speaks volumes to me in the lane of performative allyship.
Right.
Because you want that title.
Yeah.
There's something about that title that there's an empowerment.
A domination.
A domination.
I would say more than empowerment, a domination.
A domination.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. And we'll have to talk again about how fragility, enters the space. And but I want to ask you. You said, hey, it's wise to allow people to earn trust. right? How do you repair trust if harm happens?
Well, I mean, everybody that I'm in a relationship with who's a person of color has carte blanche to talk to me about if they feel like I've misstepped.
That's good.
And what I've learned is that through trial and error, like, first of all, to take it in and to listen to the impact, the impact I've had, and put my intention aside. I don't want to start with intention, but what's the impact I had? And
Okay.
just be able to hear it. And then depending on who and what it is, I don't always want to go, oh, da 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 da. Like, let me take in so I can learn what I did here. And sometimes I'll say things like, do you want me to get back with you once I understand? And lots of times they'll say, at this point, no, go do your work. Like, because they know I will, and they don't want to hear about it.
Yes.
Like they just want me to know the impact. I think
because then that becomes our responsibility again in the relationship. Yeah, that's real. That's real. That's a real thing. Yeah.
So, and I think the biggest thing is to get intention out of white people want to defend their intention.
Intention. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's true. I don't want to say every white person, because I'm like, you know what I'm saying, but I do.
Whiteness. I would say whiteness.
Whiteness. Okay. Yeah.
The structure of whiteness wants you to defend your intention and not just sit there and pay attention to the impact.
To the impact. No, that's real. Because I submit that there are two types of racism. I think there is an evil, inbred, malicious, it is what it is, racism. I also think there's a racism that is equally as harmful, and even sometimes more so. Because if I know you just don't deal with me because I'm Black, that's
clear.
That's clear, right? But that racism that's rooted in the lack of proximity.
Lack of proximity and not checking your brain.
Correct, right? And not when it shows itself up, like, because I also have to check myself sometimes, Suzanne. So I am PTO president for our high school. And our high school is predominantly white. And so my principal is a woman of color. Right? She's a Black woman. And recently, they were having the protest with ICE, right? And so she wrote a letter to the families. Hey, this is what the children are doing, and these are the parameters that we've set up for them to do XYZ during the school hours, right? I was at the school having a meeting, and a parent said to her, "Oh my gosh, I read that letter, and you write so well." And so I said, she is an accomplished, educated woman. What did you expect? She's the principal of the school. What exactly did you expect? No, I'm just, because she asked her, she said, "Did you write that?" And she's going on and on. And I'm going to have this conversation, because my initial desire to say to her was, what you said was viable. What I choose to do is I'm going to ask her, would you say that to a white principal?
If she were a white principal, right.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to unpack sometimes. And just like, would you say that? Is it really that you didn't recognize this young woman and her friend standing outside? Would you have said that to two white kids? And maybe he would have. I don't know. I can't say that I know. I can say what I think. Right. But I don't have definitive proof. Right. I have historical baggage, but I don't have definitive proof. And that's where I find myself on this, on this pendulum that we share, wanting to hold people accountable so that we can get to the next step, but also not wanting to, because sometimes they are just social missteps. Like they would possibly say the same thing, but I am going to ask, it's worth the question, right?
It's worth a question. But sometimes, first of all, I want to say I've heard those things in my own head. Oh, she's smart for a Black woman. I've heard that in my head.
Yeah.
I don't say it out loud because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, Suzanne, where is that? But that's what I'm saying. If you don't pay attention to your mind, that's in our heads. To think that
Yeah.
it's not in our heads because we're socialized that way. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like that has never popped in my head.
Right.
I'd be
Right.
lying to you if that, but
Yeah.
I think it's complicated. On both sides, like in terms of when I see like racial harm, how I do it in a way that invites learning and doesn't
Yeah.
shut everything down, or sometimes let it shut down and plant a seed. I don't know, but I think both of us are saying when we're seeing something, how do we find a way to not just say,
To
oh,
keep the conversation going.
to keep it going in a skillful way that requires, like what Donna James said, is, you have to hold the other person's dignity while you're telling truth.
Oh, that's
And that's,
good. Donna is
what
such a brilliant
oh my
person.
God, I know. But
Yes.
you know what I'm saying? Like, am I
Yeah.
holding that person's dignity while I'm inviting a hard conversation, or am I fracturing it? And that's where, like I said, when I was really mad when she told me I had to take the sentence out. I think you're acting from implicit bias because, I did after a while understand that was an accusation. So how can I say something either as a question, but without accusing? So I'm not shunning, but
Sure.
it's hard. See, I do the same thing. I believe, without asking, I believe she would not have said that if it were a white person. But then
Sure.
I'd have to ask the question too.
Right. We both, yes, we both have the same belief, right? But and especially in spaces where I show up, I mean, I have a couple of Facebook friends, and these are women that I've been friends. I was friends very close. I shared this with you, women I've been, very close with. We traveled together. We reared our children together at certain stages, and I moved, and we moved. We're in different places. But when I look at your Facebook profile, and you have, I'm, lying, you have 680,000 friends, and there's one Black person in there.
Yeah.
Then I know there's no way you can see me, right? And it's insulting. Again, I've had friends, say to me, "Oh, Jamie, you're just a white woman trapped in a Black woman's body." Again, they think it's a way to make me and feel better. And I'm like, no, I am a Black woman trapped in a white woman's world. Okay.
Yes, experiencing micro and macro aggressions.
Yes.
And having to endure. Come on.
Like this right here at lunch. We are at lunch and you say this to me. What the hell am I supposed to do with this now? Like, I no longer want my fried grouper. I just want to go home.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
If you were to leave our audience with a nugget on a practical step that our listeners can take to delve into these types of conversations with other people, to build relationships. That is a real skill that you have, to build relationships for the purposes of the good, not from an exploitation standpoint. It's not like you go out, I'm going to go find a Black friend today. But how, it's not a picnic. When you go back to what...
It's not tokenizing.
Right. It's not tokenizing, right?
Right.
So let's go. What would your recommendation be?
My first thing is to get over yourself and think that you're a good person, and that's going to take care of it. Because philosophically, you can care about race, but until you examine your socialization and how race operates and how it's inside of your own mind, and not to pretend like it's not. I don't pretend that I acknowledge that I am socialized to see Black people as 3/5 human. I am socialized to see that way. Now, that isn't my philosophy, but until I come to terms with that's how I've been socialized, I'm not going to humanize them. I can't do a spiritual bypass over it. So part of it is taking on the accountability that it's inside of ourselves, and that socialization dehumanizes me to myself. It's not real. And so if I'm in that false reality, then I am not living in wholeness with my own self. I would say that there's a really great book. It's called White Women. I think it's a hard book to read if you're not used to this work. There's also great books like The Sum of Us or Caste or Biased. I mean, I think part of it is just saying, I'm going to dive in and learn. If anybody ever wants to get a hold of me, I'm happy. I have tons and tons of sources of material, like podcasts, like, little things to watch. But I think it's a lifelong process of being committed to the work and then also finding your own moral imperative. And so for me, it's intolerable for me to benefit from something that's producing harm on a daily basis. So I stay uncomfortable all the time and don't let myself get too comfortable, because if I get comfortable, I'm going to fall back into the whiteness of protecting my comfort and superiority. And I am given superiority. So I have to check it. These are a lot of things that I'm saying. But
no, I love it. I love it. And what you were saying, this staying uncomfortable, it wasn't that the impotence for the latest book you did is deeper than that. Yeah. And I actually have your book right here. I do want to share that. It's deeper than that. That's your book. Welcome, people. It's available on Amazon. Am I right?
And Barnes & Noble.
And Barnes & Noble. So we welcome people to check that out. Thank you so much
for having me.
This time. This has been unscripted and good.
Yeah. I love talking with you. It's so good.
Yes, the same.
If you go to my website, Unifying Solutions, on the front page, there's a way to get into the book portal. In there's a documentary, and in the documentary, it's talking about, there's a lot of people that are interviewed that are people of color that have learned how to find their livingness and their wholeness and their holiness that they hadn't gotten to really experience at that depth. So it's worth watching.
Okay, excellent. Well, we'll make sure to get our listeners over there. So thank you again for joining, and we'll see you soon. Take care, Suzanne.